have a lot of information to cover and only about 8 to 9 minutes to do it before I hear excessive throat clearing coming from that corner of the room. So I gotta get started. So what I'm gonna talk to you about today is operating a crane. Oh, man. I love this stuff because I have a toy up here that I get to play with while I explain it to you, and it's a working toy. So we're gonna take just a few minutes and get her set up. Now, there's several different key factors to running a crane. I'm going to talk about 3 of them, the important ones, right? Hopefully. Now, the 3 factors are the basic physics involved in how to run a crane. It's pretty simple. It's a lever and a fulcrum. Archimedes once said, "Give me a long enough lever and a fulcrum on which to place it, I'll move the world." And I love that one because the good folks at LeBaire, hell, they're damn near setting out to prove it right. It's a manufacturer of this here crane. Well, it's actually a toy made by Gruder, but they modeled it after a LeBaire. One of the best cranes manufactured today by the Germans. So, around. The basic principles involved, that being a lever and a fulcrum, will actually enable this crane, yes, this very crane, this little toy, to pick up more than it weighs, which I shall demonstrate as soon as I get my counterweights attached here. There we go. Yeah. Now, oh yeah, that's a sweet spot right there. So what do I talk about when I say a fulcrum and a lever? This is your lever, this is your fulcrum. The neat part about it is we can actually demonstrate by using this 8-pound, 14-ounce jug of water. And this is a pre-approved lifting strap, by the way, doubly inspected by myself. This crane weighs 7 pounds, 9 ounces. How does that work? Because you're putting all of the force, all of this weight, you're transferring it on this lever to this fulcrum to pick it up. Alright, that's the basic physics of the crane. Mechanical advantage is the key word to remember on this. Alright, so that's the basics. Now we're going to go into a few other things. I want to talk about how to run the crane, and that's going to involve setup, and it's going to involve load charts. And after I talk about how to run it, I'm going to talk about how to get certified to run it. And there's an important order in this because you don't go out without any knowledge and get your crane certification. Usually you become what's called an oiler, and you go through and you're on the job training for a couple of years before you actually go out and get certified. So, there we go. It's a lot of involved details in the setup of a crane. So the first thing we're going to do, very first thing you need to look out for, ground compaction. If you want to set up a crane, you better know exactly what kind of ground you're setting up on. That's extremely important. I can't emphasize it enough. I called up a good friend of mine in the trade. He's one of the best crane operators I've ever met. He has picked up loads you couldn't even believe. And I asked him, I said, if there was one thing you could tell somebody coming up to become a crane operator, what would it be? He said, check the ground. And I said, well, what was the worst thing that ever happened to you? Ground gave way. So, just a good emphasis. What does that mean? Well, these little blocks I have under here, these are called the outriggers. These little square blocks I have put under here are called outrigger pads. They need to be 3 times the size of the feet on the outrigger. That's to disperse the weight. In case you run into soggy ground, maybe it was recently drilled, you don't know. You go to set up, And everything could be hunky-dory. Everything's fine until you start loading this baby up. And then all of a sudden you'll see if your outriggers are on sturdy ground or not. So we got all set up. We know our ground's good. Yeah, we have compaction reports, geological surveys have been done. All right, we're ready to set her up. So we get it set up, got our outrigger pads. Our outriggers are set to the position in which we're going to be picking. There's different positions you can set your outriggers on. There's different load charts to follow for such. That's pretty involved though. We're just going to pretend we're set up exactly the way we're supposed to be. All right. Now I've got my crane all set up. Now I want to do an inspection on it. Had the hook two-parted here. Gotta single it out. There we go. First thing you want to look at is the structural sound body of the crane. Is it structurally sound? So you start inspecting your outriggers here. Yeah, okay, I got some reinforced zip ties on the corners of these. Fantastic. That flies. Yeah. You're gonna check the pivot points, anything that can turn, anything that could possibly break, you want to take a look at. You want to take a look at your wire rope, all these hinge pins, your turntable. All right. Checks out. Gonna run it through the basic functions of the crane. Still good. All right. After inspecting all components, oh, we're ready to fly. All right. So now the basics of running a crane, again, go to that basic physical principle. That physical principle is you're using the crane as a lever and fulcrum. So the closer the load is to you, the better leverage you have on that load. As it gets farther away from you, that load has increasing leverage on your crane. Don't worry, there'll be further demonstrations. There'll be a loop. We're going to put that out there. Oh, you can see the boom deflection now. She's loaded. Yeah. Randomly hitting buttons isn't working.
What do you want, PC?
Nope, I need the display.
You had it.
It's on
You're having a
freeze.
display right now.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, it's on freeze. Hit freeze
Where's freeze?
on the,
Pause?
on the machine itself. No, something different. There you go. There you go. Now you
Oh,
can put
fantastic.
whatever you want up.
All right, I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh God, not math. That's the first thing I think. Oh geez, why? This is too short. We don't have enough time. All right, look. When I'm talking about the basic principles, it's super simple to look at. This is what's called a load chart. This is your bread and butter. If you want to learn how to run a crane, you need to learn how to read a load chart. So right here, the first thing you're going to look at, what's the maximum capacity on this here crane? We got 56,000 pounds. That means it's a 28-ton crane. So that's going to be the designations, usually in tons. So at 28 foot is your boom length up here. So at 5 foot away for a radius, which a 5 foot radius is right at the back of the crane. It's right there. The radius is from the center of your turntable to the center of your load line. That distance is going to be your radius. So if we were to equate this into inches, this would probably be about 20-inch radius. So we'll call it feet. So we can do that. So a 20-foot radius, obviously you're going to be able to pick a heck of a lot less from this far than you could from this far. And all of that information is detailed right here. So if you look right here, this is our operating radius column. You want to go down here, what is the maximum you could pick at 25 foot? Somebody tells you, hey, get in that crane, go set it up over here, and make that pick. You have no idea if they did the math or anything. You have to figure that out as the crane operator. You have to go out there, physically measure from the load radius to your crane, and see if you can actually make the pick. So the first thing, okay, 25 foot. How far away is it? 25 foot. How much stick do you need? Well, that's going to be dependent on where you need to move it to. So at 25 foot away, I have 47 foot of stick. I'm going to be able to pick up 14,500 pounds. It's a pretty simple chart, but the math can get tricky. If you need to figure out to move it, okay, I'm going to move it from 25 foot, now I'm going to move it to 30 foot. Well, you're going to lose 2,000 pounds, well, 2,400, 2,380, right on your boom, right there. Can you still pick it? There's several other things you need to take into account before you can even do that. How much rigging do you have? How much does that weigh? These all need to be factored on. Your jib. You need to take out deductions. If the jib is stowed on the side of the boom, you're going to have to deduct that weight from your total pick. These are all very involved things. They all come with experience. So now we know the basic physics behind running a crane. Basic setup, firm level ground, and it also needs to be within 1 degree of level for the truck mounted carrier crane, which means perfectly level is 0 degrees. So it can be 1 degree out of level. That's it. Before the load charts will no longer be applicable. So we're within 1 degree of level. We've done our inspection. Everything's good. Okay, now we know exactly how far away we have to pick. We checked our load chart. Absolutely, we can make that pick. Everything's gold. Now the main thing I like to stress about doing my setup and my inspection is that gives me confidence in order to run this crane. Because I guarantee you, if you get in a crane, eventually you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to come into a situation where it's like, whew, okay, I got this. Nope, okay, nope, I don't want to do this anymore. And you will get out of the crane. I've seen it 100 times. Oh my God. It can be so stressful if you're not comfortable. The knowledge of how to set it up, how to inspect it, and how to read a load chart, that knowledge gives you the comfort level to safely operate this crane. So, yeah, those are all very important factors. So the final thing I was going to talk about is getting certified to run a crane. This is kind of a lot of pitfalls here. If anybody's thinking about the construction trade and thinking, man, a crane cert, oh, it's a great thing to have. There's always a call for crane certs, and it will jump you up on the list. If you are waiting to get called out on a job, if you have your crane cert, you're going to get the call way before that guy who doesn't. So if you want to get certified, there's several different ways you can do it. The most common and easiest way to do it is just to go and register for an NCCCO class. Yeah, NCCCO, which is National Crane Certification. Certification Institute. That's not it. But it costs about $3,000, and it's a 6-day class. Now, there's cheaper classes out there. Mine personally is the Crane Institute certification class. That costs $2,000. My company paid for that. They paid for me to get certified. There's also 3-week or 6-week courses that could cost upwards of $12,000. And they do impart a little bit more knowledge, but it's just not cost effective. And the knowledge you gain in that 3 to 6 weeks isn't going to compare to anything from what you get on the job training. But that, I mean, it's super, super important to have a good knowledge base before you even get in a crane. There's been so many crane accidents over the years. that the OSHA's came out and said you need to be accredited. They've actually put a cap on it. This year's the last year you can run a crane without being certified. However, most companies require it now anyways, just so they're already in compliance with OSHA. And the reason for that is because the operator is the responsible party. So I've talked to you a little bit about the physics, I've talked to you about the setup, and I've talked to you about how to get accredited certification. And when I say accredited, I mean it has to meet all of the OSHA guidelines and to be valid and recognized by the companies in which that will employ you. After all of that, there's still a lot of general knowledge that can only be gained through on-the-job training. And that's not to mention the ground and everything else. There's manufacturer specifications on certain cranes. Every crane is different. And there's also a lot of other physics involved, such as dynamic loading, which means if you pick something that's laying on its side, how can you stand it up properly without putting undue side strain on this boom? Cranes do not like side strain and they will fold up. I've been on projects where it's happened. I've never seen it, thank God, knock on wood, but I've been on projects where it's happened and it's bad, bad news. In 1999, in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Brewers Stadium, a lot of you have maybe heard of Big Blue going down. There's a lot of factors. The final determining factor in that crash, and this was a massive lattice crane. The final determining factor in that crash was wind. They were making a massive pick. They were picking up 1 million pounds, and it was what's called a critical lift. Back to my load chart. If you look at the load chart, anything that approaches within 80% of any of these numbers is going to be a critical lift because it's within 80% of the capacity of this crane. And it can occur anywhere in this chart, obviously. So if you want to pick up something at 12 feet away, 22,500 pounds is your maximum. So if you were at 20,000 pounds, you're within critical lift stage. And there's a special form that needs to be filled out. Milwaukee Stadium accident, they were making a critical pick. Now, we're talking about a 1 million pound section of the roof. In order to plan that pick, the logistics involved are staggering. You have hundreds of workers standing by, ready to pin this giant chunk of steel in place. You have people hanging from aerial baskets all around it, and they're waiting on go. And it takes months of planning in order to make this pick. So when the day finally came to make the pick, and they were clocking 25-mile-an-hour winds. 25-mile-an-hour winds, and they said, well, today's the day. We have all these people, we're gonna have to pay them regardless if we get this done or not, so let's just get it done. The crews had already gone home. They said, deuces, it's too windy, we ain't even doing it. That didn't stop them. Powers that be decided to keep doing it. And they got, again, this is a critical lift, mind you. And they got the pick up. And they almost got it in place. All you had to do was boom down a little bit more and winch off. A gust caught it. It took way too much side strain on that crane, and it snapped the main bearing in the turntable. And that whole son of a gun folded up. Wind, I just can't stress it enough, wind is a huge factor in crane operations, and people ignore it all the time. Because, hey, safety's number one, right behind production. Gotta get the job done. So, and it doesn't take much. This crane is pretty close to its capacity right now. And this is a pretty big pick. This is going to catch a lot of wind, this puppy. So what happens if a little bit of wind moves it just a little bit outside? You'll have structural damage, or you will have a tipping factor, which is when the whole crane comes over. In conclusion, nothing beats experience, but you got to get out there and do it. You got to get out there and learn. A crane operator can make $36 an hour starting in the state of Minnesota, and you will always have a job. Even when other people are out of work, they're gonna want you. That about concludes my speech and demonstration, folks. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.